Good afternoon, friends. Welcome to Winchester. I am standing in the Great Hall, which is an amazing piece of 13th century architecture. It's the last remaining piece, and a substantial piece, it has to be said, of Winchester Castle, which is from where the King of England ruled the nation for a very long time. This is the last part that still remains standing. There are ruins here and there, but this is intact. Winchester Castle was founded in 1067 by William the Conqueror. Keen viewers of my channel will remember that the church next to my parents' house, St Mary's, was built by the Normans in 1080 and was the first church the Normans built. Winchester Castle was built, the construction began 1 year after the conquest in 1067. Then, a lot later, 1222 AD, Henry III, who was the King of England and was also quite the architecture enthusiast, commissioned this hall to be built. It is one of the finest 13th century aisled great halls in the country, in the nation. And if we look a little closely here, held up by these huge marble columns, Purbeck marble, apparently, but Katie, the lovely person who works here, has advised me, was mined on the Isle of Wight and then brought here. But really, very attractive pillars. Really interesting architecture because you can see the different styles, I guess, between stone and flint and mortar that graduates up to the bigger stuff at the top. Okay, this is really interesting because now if you like, the version of the legend of King Arthur, in much the same way as Dante's Inferno, the vision of Dante, pretty much wrote what we now think of when we think of hell. His is the vision that we think of. In much the same way, Thomas Malory in the late 1400s, the late 15th century, created La Mort d'Arthur, which is essentially what we think of when we think of King Arthur, the Round Table, and the hunt for the Holy Grail and the knights and all the rest. Now, when he wrote that, they honestly thought that this was, because this predates Malory by 2 centuries, and they honestly thought that this was the Round Table dating to the Dark Ages, the 6th century, and it was the actual table that Arthur and his knights sat around. They honestly thought that, because it's 500 years ago. The table actually dates to the 1300s, and they had a concerted effort about 150 years ago to really try and trace it, and that's when they started using forensic techniques, if you like, both research and eventually carbon dating, to come up with an actual answer to the question. It is huge. It's like 30 feet across, and it's been hanging on this wall for a very long time. Okay, call me crazy, right? But these 2 caps, if you like, to the doors, which were made in 1931, they remind me so much of Sauron's helmet from Lord of the Rings. Does anyone else see that? So I'm outside the hall now. It's a really very impressive building. I am walking through Queen Eleanor's garden, which admittedly would be so much more impressive in the summer, because of course it's the middle of winter. There's a walk through there where you can walk underneath the boughs. Must be magical in the summer. This garden was commissioned and built in 1986. It was opened in 1986 by Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. That's Queen Elizabeth II's mother. It's called Queen Eleanor's Garden. It was named for the Queen, the wife and Queen of Henry III, who built the Great Hall and the castle to its current status. It really is quite lovely, but as I say, be a little bit more impressive in the summer. So behind me is a rather grand bronze statue of Queen Victoria, the Empress of the British Empire, seated on her throne. In much the same way, I mean, the Queen's 50th Golden Jubilee was celebrated, of course, all over the Empire, including, of course, the clock tower in Brighton that I mentioned last week. This bronze was created by a man called Alfred Gilbert R.A. in 1887, and of course it was instituted here. It's been moved around the Great Hall a few times, but it has always been here. And so yes, another Golden Jubilee entry. So one more thing about King Arthur before I leave. The first known mention of King Arthur was in the Welsh poem Ygodithin by the Welsh epic poet Aneurin in the 7th century. So that is literally the 600s. Excalibur, the legendary sword, wasn't mentioned until the 1100s or so. But it's a very, very old legend. And of course, the concept of chivalry, knighthood, all of that does kind of stem from that legend. Always fun. Believe it or not, that these days is an office building.
So Henry the
Like I say, one hell of an office building. I mean, it's the city council, you understand. It's not like it's Starbucks, but it's still an office building. Very nice.